This shorter version of a 12-second clip you're about to see exploded with over 250,000 views in September 2023, yet the tennis world simply moved on, vanished it, as if it never happened. A shocking gesture from the world #1 player, caught on camera in front of families and children. But because it's Aryna Sabalenka, we're told it's just friendly banter. Today, Unstruct AI forces the question nobody dares to ask. What if this was Coco Gauff? What if it was some other top player? The reaction would have been a nuclear fallout. We're about to reveal why this was tennis's most conveniently forgotten unprofessional moment. August 2023, the scene is a routine practice match between Aryna Sabalenka, then world #2, and on the brink of securing her first #1 ranking, and Ons Jabeur. Families watched from the sidelines, kids filled the crowd, cameras silently rolling. After a lost point, Sabalenka turns to her friend and delivers this.
Professional athletes understand they are always on. Whether in practice, warm-up, or just walking to their car, they represent their sport. When you hold the world #1 ranking, that responsibility is magnified exponentially. This gesture reveals a fundamental disregard for professional conduct in public spaces.
The tennis community's reaction was illuminating. Some dismissed it as lovely vibes between friends. Others feigned concern, asking where's her sportsmanship. But here's the insidious omission. Imagine if this was Coco Gauff. Imagine if this was any other top player. The backlash would have been absolutely nuclear.
I've been in professional tennis for 20 years. I can tell you unequivocally, this double standard is glaring. Sabalenka gets a free pass because this behavior is almost expected from her. But players like Coco, who are meticulously scrutinized, would face congressional hearings for something like this. This isn't about friendship, it's about a blatant disregard for professional standards.
One parent in the comments nailed it. There are children, respect families there. Another fan simply stated, that's not something you do on a tennis court with an audience. These aren't purists being uptight. These are people who brought their kids to witness elite athletes and instead got this.
Here's the cosmic irony. This happened when Sabalenka was world #2, desperately chasing that #1 ranking. She'd achieve it weeks later, only to lose it again by year's end, and that very next Grand Slam final she lost. It was the US Open, against none other than Coco Gauff. Maybe the universe was watching that practice court. Maybe karma saw that middle finger and decided to serve up some justice of its own. Professional conduct and integrity matters, even when you think nobody important is watching. Let's run the full thought experiment. Coco Gauff makes this gesture. What unfolds? Sports media explodes. Sponsors review contracts. The WTA issues condemnations. Congressional hearings are suddenly on the table. But when Sabalenka does it, oh, that's just Aryna being Aryna. The hypocrisy isn't just present, it's absolutely staggering.
This incident exposes differing behavioral expectations for different players. Sabalenka has cultivated an image where this type of behavior is somehow normal for her, but professional conduct is not personality dependent. It is a universal standard. The world #1 should embody the highest standards, not the lowest acceptable behavior.
I coach junior tennis, and these kids absorb every move the pros make. When the world #1 behaves like this in public, I'm left having to explain to 8-year-olds why that behavior is unacceptable for them. It's draining. These players need to internalize that they are role models, whether they desire that responsibility or not.
The most damning comments were buried, overrated and classless Sabalenka. Another fan highlighted her impulse control issue and referenced other unprofessional moments. The pattern was there, people observed it. They just weren't permitted to call it what it was.
What's truly frustrating is the pervasive boys will be boys mentality, except now it's Aryna will be Aryna. This exact gesture would lead to a junior player's suspension, a college player's benching. But for the world #1, she's excused because that's just her personality. That is not by any definition how professionalism functions.
Here's the kicker, this wasn't a heated, in-match reaction. This was a practice session. She had ample time to consider her actions. She chose this gesture in front of children and families. That's not a momentary lapse of impulse control. That's a calculated act of disrespect for the setting. Something we also saw during her post-match press conference at Roland Garros after another defeat in a Grand Slam final to Coco.
The comments section became a microcosm of confusion. Jesus loves you juxtaposed with she shouldn't be allowed to play. People struggled to process this. Some sought religious redemption, others demanded consequences. But ultimately, the masses simply moved on as if it never transpired.
The widespread silence surrounding this incident is arguably more damaging than the gesture itself. When we tacitly normalize unprofessional behavior from our top athletes, we erode standards for everyone. This should have been a pivotal teaching moment about public conduct. Instead, it became a glaring masterclass in privilege and double standards.
Imagine the conversation with your kids. Well, darling, when you're incredibly talented at tennis, you can make crude gestures at your friends in public, and everyone will simply call it friendship. That is not the lesson we should be teaching. That is not the sport we should be promoting.
The true tragedy is Sabalenka's immense talent. She doesn't need these antics to captivate an audience. But when you normalize such behavior, you cheapen the entire sport. Tennis is supposed to embody grace under pressure, not middle fingers during practice.
I tell my junior players, would you do this in front of your grandmother? Would you do this at school? If the answer is no, then you don't do it on a tennis court. Period. The world number one, above all others, should comprehend this fundamental principle.
The disparity in treatment is blindingly obvious. Coco Gauff faces microscopic scrutiny for every celebration, while Sabalenka wields obscene gestures without consequence. Other top players meticulously navigate public appearances, knowing every move is analyzed, yet Sabalenka seemingly operates under different rules entirely. This glaring inconsistency utterly undermines tennis's credibility.
Professional sports demand professional conduct. That is non-negotiable, irrespective of personality or personal relationships. When we excuse behavior like this, we are implicitly stating that talent trumps character. That sets a profoundly dangerous precedent for any sport.
This 12-second clip should have been a career-defining moment, not for the gesture itself, but for how the sport of tennis chose to handle it. We chose silence over standards. We chose excuses over accountability. We chose to actively protect one player while simultaneously holding others to impossible standards. That is not merely unfair, it is inherently unsustainable. Tennis purports to be a gentleman's sport, a bastion of honor and respect. But when its world number one can make obscene gestures in front of children and face zero repercussions, what does that communicate about our collective values? What insidious message does that transmit to every young player watching? The next time tennis preaches about sportsmanship and professionalism, remember this moment. Remember when we had the unequivocal chance to uphold fundamental standards and instead opted for deafening silence. Because in those 12 seconds, Aryna Sabalenka didn't just show us who she is, she laid bare who we are. And perhaps that's the real, undeniable problem.